After the hard work of entering all of your codes, there's some cleanup that's required. And here you kind of have to pay attention to the details. So let's look at some of this process. You should have a spreadsheet with these columns in place. And if we look at the type of communication, here you can see a small detail. I've got a capital M and then a lowercase u. Eventually we want these all standardized so when we make charts and everything else it's going to all look professional. The biggest issue with all of this data in these cells is without having everything standardized, the counts are going to get off. So we need to go here and do some correcting to make this all line up. One way that I find really simple is to select all of the items in a column and then create a chart. You go to the Insert menu and choose Chart. And here we can see some of the glitches. So we have normalizing with a spelling error, normalizing. And look here, we have urging and motivating. While you're doing this kind of work, you might also think about where you can combine and trim down. I'm going to change urging to be motivating. As you develop these codes, you may find that you end up with 8 or 10, and it gets a little bit hard to actually make sense of this data. So if you can combine things, if it makes sense, it's useful. So now I've got motivating twice, I've cleaned up my typo, and if I go look at this chart again, you're going to see that this looks much cleaner, and I actually can see some distinctions between the types of communication. So this work is a little bit tedious, but once you're all finished, you'll have this nice chart that tells you what's going on in that column, and it may be that you can download that and use it in your report. And if so, you're halfway toward having a nice discussion of a visual in your document that you produce. Inserting charts is a quick way to test your data and can also give you basic information about the amounts of codes in a single column. This can be highly valuable, but you can do even more to cross-reference different columns and make better sense of the conversation. Let's look at a new spreadsheet to explore that process. This spreadsheet was coded to make sense of a conversation related to the Silent Sam Confederate Monument at UNC Chapel Hill. Many aspects will be recognizable, such as the type of communication, aspects such as whether the tweet shared an article or contained an image, and things like the political affiliation of the poster. So we have a lot of data, many columns that have been filled out, and we can use all of these to create charts and graphs. So what I'm going to do is select each of these columns. If I hold down the Shift key and click in one column, and then I go and click at the top of this other column, you can see all of these columns have been selected and they're now available for me. I'm going to go to the Data menu and choose Pivot Table. And then I'm going to click New Sheet. And you can see this has created a new sheet in my spreadsheet where it's going to allow me to mix these different columns. And here I'm going to use these tools. I'm going to select a row. And to get started, we'll choose something like the pro, con, or neutral stance. Now you'll notice there's a little bit of a glitch here in that there's some extra rows in this data that I tried to set up. So I'm going to remove those. And I'm going to do that with a filter. So I'm going to add a filter for this settlement category. And in this filter, I can tell it what to show. And I'm going to turn off the blanks. These other items are where I had a space accidentally in my cell. So if I clean those out, now I've gotten rid of that and I have 3 rows, con, neutral, or pro, the exact information I need. Now I'm going to cross-reference that. So I'm going to add a column in here. And on this one, I'll choose the political affiliation, left, right. And let me add a filter as well. This filter is going to let me, again, clean up and take out any empty cells. So now you can see I've got one column, stance on the statue settlement, and then I've got political leanings. The next step is to add values for what's going to be in here. So I'm going to click Add under Values, and I'm going to put the values, the counts for the left and right in here. So now I'm able to see those who were opposed to the settlement, where did they show up on the political spectrum. Finally, I'm going to make a chart out of this information, and for this one I'm going to not select the grand totals because those sometimes make the chart look a little bit funky, but you can try that and see how it turns out. But I'm going to leave the grand total out, and mostly I want the left, right, and to see how they line up with their stance on this settlement. So I'm going to select only the rows and columns that you see here. I'll drag across them. You can also hold down the shift key. And now let me make my chart, and you'll see how this all comes together. So now I can see those who were opposed to the settlement. Were they on the left? Were they on the right? Those who were neutral and those who were pro-settlement. And the two columns are now coming together with the color coding, and I can really start to do some comparison and draw some conclusions. And then I, of course, can download this image and use it in my composition as well. So the pivot tables are going to give you a lot of control over the data. Again, there's a lot of work to get to this place. Once you have everything cleaned up, and then once you create the table and do additional cleanup and get the hang of how to blend two different columns together into the pivot table, you'll be able to have a lot of power as you make sense of this conversation. So I'm able to do all of this and just kind of see with different types of communication. Are people using emotion? Are they using logic? And then I can create the visualizations that allow me to really bring this into light and also use it. You can tweak these visualizations a little bit. There's menus for that, and you can experiment with that. And all of this is going to get you where you need to be for this kind of analysis and composing.